Well, when the First Minister came into the View studio a short time ago, I asked him first for his thoughts on how today's discussions had gone.
We really got down to only about three issues where there was not overall agreement. And the Prime Minister will obviously have to make a choice between the position that we were advocating and the position the Treasury was advocating.
What are the sticking points? What are the three issues that still need to be resolved?
Well, there are issues that relate to the mechanisms that are used for adjusting it in future years. There are issues relating to secondary impact, issues that would be whether income tax, VAT and national insurance contributions should be taken into account. And that could be quite a lot of money, literally up to £100 million over a period of time. And there are a number of things that need to be resolved in relation to profit shifting and so forth, where we have a view, the Treasury has a view. Needless to say, our view would make it better for Northern Ireland. Yeah,
what about the figures? I mean, how close are you now as far as the figures are concerned? Because there have been all kinds of wild estimates as to what the cost might be to Northern Ireland PLC if this goes ahead. 400 million a year, rising perhaps to 700 million a year. I mean, what's your bottom line on that, in simple terms?
Well, obviously it would be unwise to say what my bottom line was in terms of where we would be trying to encourage the Prime Minister to go. What I can say is that it depends on the mechanism you use. You might start on Treasury figures in the 300 to 400 million mark. But if they use the mechanism that the Treasury wants to use, it could well go up to maybe somewhere around 700 million within the next 10 to 15 years.
Right. The Secretary of State, Theresa Villiers, in her first television interview, sitting in that very seat that you're sitting in tonight, said she was going to be a persuader for this development. Is that how she played it today?
Well, I think both Theresa and her predecessor, Owen Paterson, have been supportive. They've been speaking to the business community in Northern Ireland. They know how much it needs. They also can see the impact that we are undergoing with the recession. I went to the meeting today through the Belfast Telegraph on the table to give them some sense of the difficulties that we were facing, where it was indicating various sectors that were down by a considerable percentage and how unemployment was going up. So, if it was right when the Prime Minister came to Northern Ireland, when we had a lower level of unemployment, it must be even more right that we have the issue addressed now and we have our economy rebalanced.
OK, just before we move on, if you had to call it one way or the other, do you think this is going to happen or not?
Well, I'm not going to call it. We've done our work. It's now with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister indicated very stoutly during the election campaign that he was in favour of rebalancing the economy. He's had his ministers expend a very considerable amount of time and energy on this issue. Officials have been working on it for years. So I certainly hope that that is the road that they're going to take.
OK, there were four ministers representing the executive there today. Three from the DUP, one from Sinn Féin, the Deputy First Minister. Were you all singing off the same song sheet today?
Completely. And we have been at all of those meetings. We all recognise that it's advantageous. Obviously, it has to be done in the context of something that is affordable. But all of us were arguing the same case during the course of today. OK,
it's interesting to hear you say that, because it does seem that there are other areas of policy where you're not necessarily singing off the same song sheet. You've been notably, may I suggest, outspoken about your Sinn Féin partners in government recently. How difficult are relations on the wider political landscape between you and Martin McGuinness?
I think we're both very politically mature. We know how to deal with these issues. We come from very different political ideologies, so we're going to have differences from time to time, and we have to manage those. I had to manage them when Sinn Féin, in my view outrageously, came to the Assembly to try and get one of my ministers sacked. I had to deal it with Sinn Féin having allowed the welfare reform bill to go from the executive into the Assembly, then decided that they were going to oppose it in the Assembly. So I have to manage those kind of issues, and I don't think it was unreasonable that I should comment on those matters.
You said in a speech to DUP members just 48 hours ago that Sinn Féin's fear of the SDLP often paralyses decisions in the executive. Were you talking about welfare reform?
I think I specifically mentioned welfare reform in those remarks. I recognise that all of us in the political sphere have to look around us in terms of where everybody else is positioning themselves. But I think you can get to the stage where you're caught in the headlights if you are increasingly looking over your shoulder and afraid to act because of the position that somebody else might adopt.
Is the SDLP wagging the Sinn Féin dog?
I really do think that they need to stop looking over their shoulder and stand up for themselves and take the responsible position in government. It would have been easy for my party to say, look, we don't like welfare. Well, just let me finish this. It would be easy for us to say, we don't like welfare reform. We're opting out. We're going to vote for it, and then we're going to vote against it. And people out there will not blame us. Well, that's not the responsible thing to do, because it would have had a very damaging impact. So Sinn Féin take a position knowing that we're going to act responsibly, therefore they can act irresponsibly on the issue.
There's a rich irony, is there not, Mr Robinson, in you actually suggesting that you would find it easier to deal directly with Sinn Féin on these issues, Sinn Féin, the Republican Party, and that the more moderate nationalist SDLP is sticking a stick in the spoke of the wheel, if you like.
Well, the implication there is that the SDLP, if they were the larger party, would be behaving in that way. Of course they wouldn't. They would have known that if they took the position that they adopted, because they're a small party within the Assembly, that it would have been totally irresponsible. It would have ended up with us being costed something like over £200 million. It would have meant that jobs could have been lost. It would also have meant that we would have had people who were looking for money from the social fund who wouldn't have been able to get it. That would have been totally irresponsible. They wouldn't have done that if they had been the larger party.
So you're disappointed in the way Sinn Féin has conducted itself in recent weeks?
I'm very disappointed, both in terms of the attempt to have Nelson dismissed, and also the fact that they didn't stand with us to do the responsible thing and allow the bill to go into committee. And here's the key issue. What was it all about? We are agreed on what changes are needed to the bill. Our argument is that you have a better chance of getting that, working with the government and getting it in committee.
And have you told Martin McGuinness that?
Well, of course we told him at the executive and elsewhere. And I believe that time will be able to prove whether I am right or whether they were right. And that will be judged on the basis of whether we can get those changes by working with the government.
OK, so you've got to work alongside Martin McGuinness. The DUP's got to work alongside Sinn Féin. But when you sit down to talk to him, do you look at him as an ally or as an enemy?
Well, when we're bringing forward policy, obviously we have to put forward our own positions and see what common ground there is and how we can move forward on issues. And I don't believe that if you had set the Conservative and Labour Party down and said, right, you have a mandatory coalition, you have to work together, I don't believe that they would have done as well as we have.
What do you make of the arrival of the Mary Stopes Clinic in Belfast today and the attendant furore that has come with that?
I don't see the need for the clinic. They're not offering something that isn't available from our services within the National Health Service.
But do you accept that the clinic has the right to be here? If it operates within the law, it's perfectly entitled to open up.
They have the legal right to be here, providing they do work and operate within the law. And I think we have seen one of the failings is that there isn't really a process for properly monitoring that, and I think that's something that we have to look at. And
the Attorney-General, John Larkin's offer to the Justice Committee at Stormont to assist in any investigation it might wish to commence into the arrival of the clinic. Did that surprise you? Did you know about that in advance?
I didn't know about it in advance, but I think John has indicated that he wouldn't be doing it in an official capacity. And I don't think that we can really curtail people who are doing something outside their official duties.
He wouldn't be doing it in an official capacity. He would. The letter that he wrote to the committee today was on his headed notepaper.
Well, the letter that he wrote on his headed notepaper said that if he was to help them, it would not be in an official capacity. And as long as there is no conflict, that doesn't become a problem. But if there comes a conflict for somebody who is acting as the legal advisor to the executive in helping a committee, then there would be a problem.
But the interesting thing is that in that letter, he invited the committee to commence an investigation.
Yes, and I suppose any of us are entitled to our views. And don't forget...
Is that a personal view, or is that his view as Attorney-General?
Well, it may not be different to the extent that the Attorney-General in Northern Ireland is not a member of the government, isn't someone who is controlled by the government. The Attorney-General is an independent individual who has statutory responsibilities.
Yeah, but he's the primary law officer in Northern Ireland.
No, his role is to give us advice as an executive, and he does have a very important role as the law officer in Northern Ireland. And I suspect that he, like the rest of us, was looking back and saying, look, there's a gap here. We have a clinic who, in my view, under our present circumstances, would not be monitored and should be.
Okay, I can't let you go, Mr Robinson, without asking you about your political future. You've already indicated you're not going to stand for Westminster again. There's going to be another Assembly election in 2015 or 2016, dependent on what the NIO decides. You're 63 now. Do you intend to lead the DUP into that next Assembly election?
Well, I don't want to press you, but that certainly is my intention at the present time.
Which would mean you'd be what, 66, 67 for a 4 or 5 year term?
A youngster. The 60s are the new 40s.
It's official then, because the First Minister said so. Peter Robinson speaking to me a little earlier this evening.